We got more great show for you, everybody. Up next, the very funny Leslie Jones is here. So grab a snack.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tim Lammers. It is 12:21 p.m. We're interrupting your regularly scheduled programming to bring you some breaking news on President Biden's imminent arrival here in Connecticut. Air Force One is in the process of landing at Bradley International Airport right now. You are taking a live look as Air Force One has just dipped behind a building right now, but again is scheduled to land any second now. And we will be following the president's travels as he gets off of Air Force One and makes his way what we believe will be to Marine One, which will then take him to Brainerd Airport in Hartford proper, where he will get off and drive a short distance to the capital region, where he is going to give some remarks on his Build Back Better plan. Once again, we're expecting Air Force One to pop up on the left side of your screen any second now there in Windsor Locks as we're waiting for touchdown. President Biden is making his second trip to Connecticut while president. The first time was back in May 19th, when he made some remarks at the U.S. Coast Guard graduation at the time down there. And there we see Air Force One as it has touched down at Bradley International Airport. Air Force One, of course, is the call sign that is given to any airplane that is carrying the President of the United States. And I believe as far as that modified Boeing 747 right there, it is one of two that are regularly used for carrying the president. That is a VC-25, which is sort of a military modified version of a Boeing 747 for presidential use. And you see it there in the background as we saw Marine One, or what will be Marine One as soon as the president steps aboard. They're waiting for him, which is also a very common thing. What the United States military will do is always have a motorcade along protected limousine and a version of Marine one of the many helicopters in their fleet there that will be used to transport the president, waiting for him ahead of time, of course, for security purposes. Why don't we get out now to FOX61 reporter Julia LeBlanc. She has spent the morning there in Windsor Locks and in East Granby, where they have been awaiting the president's arrival. And of course, a lot of curious onlookers have been there too. Julia, are you with us?
Good morning to you. Yes, I am standing by here. We have the camera on Air Force One because we know that is what everyone wants to see here. And I can tell you just the sheer size of this plane. If you haven't gotten a chance to ever see an Air Force One touchdown, it is just amazing. A couple of things here, those unforgettable markings. You are looking at the United States of America emblem there. You see the American flag and, of course, the seal of the President of the United States. We do know that President Biden is on board. Obviously, he is with more than a dozen members of his staff landing here at Bradley Air National Guard Base. It's very noisy, so I hope you folks can hear me. I'm told that this plane that you're looking at here is 4,000 square feet inside with 3 floors. So the sheer size of it and the beauty of it is really amazing to look out here. We know that President Biden will be coming out of this plane shortly as it starts to taxi here. We know that he will be getting off the plane and then entering onto Marine One, which actually does not become Marine One until the president steps onto that helicopter. We know that there are no political greeters here. We're told Governor Ned Lamont did not plan on coming. We know there is one military personnel, a colonel, that is going to be greeting him here. Again, looking at this plane right now, we are just waiting for the president to step off of it. And once that happens, of course, we don't want to miss it, so we will come back to you guys in the studio.
And we will keep a camera on Air Force One, Julia. In the meantime, why don't we talk a little bit more about the president's agenda for today? He's got a full one on tap, including visits to Hartford and to the UConn campus in Storrs. Now, if we have, why don't we show you a sort of a little graphic of the itinerary, which, by the way, should be a little delayed because initially he was scheduled to arrive and touch down somewhere between 12:15 and 12:20. As you saw, he hit the ground little closer to 12:25. So all of these times may in turn be delayed by about 5 minutes or so. So what is going to happen is, well, he could probably even drive to Brainerd Airport faster than he could fly there, but he's going to fly in Marine One at 12:40. He's scheduled to land at Brainerd Airport, and then he is going to make his way to the Capital Child Development Center on Broad Street in Hartford, reportedly, where he's going to make some remarks about the importance of child care and how that fits into his Build Back Better agenda. Fox 61's Tony Terzi is live in Hartford, where he is going to be awaiting the president's arrival. Let's check in with him now. Good morning, Tony. What is the scene like where you are there on Broad Street?
Hey there. Tim, there is a crowd that's filling in along the sidewalk where people are able to do so. And the president is scheduled to be here after flying on Marine One over to Brainerd Airport, come out Airport Road, probably up Weathersfield Avenue, and then over Main Street and Capitol Avenue to make his way to the building that's right behind us, of course, the Capital Child Development Center, where he's scheduled to speak at about 1:45 and then depart at about 2:30 before he heads to Storrs. Part of his Build Back Better plan is about $450 billion, that $3.5 trillion package. About 1/6 of it, if you will, or 1/7 will be part of this child development, trying to increase funding for child care and, of course, pre-K. That's all part of the mix. We're going to send it back to Tim in studio.
And yes, we could talk a little bit more about that in the coming minutes. We do want to sort of keep an eye there, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, as we are waiting for the president to depart Air Force One. We can see some people getting ready to leave right now. Again, the president has not made his way out of Air Force One yet, but he's not going to last long, because he's not going to stay there long. As you heard Julia say, there's not exactly a huge contingent of people who are going to be waiting to greet him. He is going to get off of Air Force One and probably get right on to Marine One, so he can make his way over to Brainerd Airport. In the meantime, he is doing this visit to Connecticut, not just to talk about the importance of child care in Hartford. He is also going, more or less, to support a friend, longtime Connecticut Senator Chris Dodd, because up in Storrs, which is going to be the president's second destination of the day, there is the Dodd Center for Human Rights that is being essentially renamed, not just in honor of Senator Chris Dodd, but now jointly in honor of Senator Chris Dodd and his father, who is also a senator and who is also very much involved in human rights, going all the way back to his time as a prosecutor during the Nuremberg trials. And Senator Chris Dodd and President Joe Biden certainly go a long way back. They're only 2 years removed in age. In fact, I had mentioned before, when President Biden last came to Connecticut, on May 19th of this year for the Coast Guard ceremony, Chris Dodd was there at the time, too, to support his friend. And at the time, and we may even have some video of that last visit to show you while we're waiting for the president to come out of Air Force One. Now, he had at times a very jovial speech to the graduating class of the Coast Guard Academy, but he was telling them that this is a new world, that the world is changing, and that the threats to the United States have been changing, and they're more of hybrid threats, both inside our borders, outside our borders, that we need to meet them on the land and the sea, and he said that is where the Coast Guard excels. He wished them well during that speech. He also sort of ceremoniously absolved them of all of their infractions, their minor infractions they had during their time as cadets there from Swab Summer on. So just to catch you back up, President Joe Biden did land at Bradley International Airport. You are looking live at Air Force One right now. He landed about 5 or 6 minutes ago, a little bit later than his scheduled arrival time, which was between 12:15 and 12:20, depending on which White House communique you were looking at. And he is scheduled to get off of Air Force One and get onto Marine One, one of the many helicopters in the fleet that services him, that was there waiting for him at Bradley International Airport. He is going to head from there down to Brainerd Airport, probably a short 10-minute flight or so. Once he arrives at Brainerd Airport, he is going to get in the motorcade and make his way right up to Broad Street in Hartford, near downtown, only a block away from the Fox 61 studios. So, hey, easy reporting for us on that front. And he is going to the Capital Child Development Center on Broad Street in Hartford. Again, this is to talk more about the specific arm of his Build Back Better agenda. That arm, initially, when he proposed it back in April, was the American Families Plan. At the time, it was a $1.8 trillion plan. About $1 trillion of that in raw spending, and then about $800 billion was going to come from tax cuts. And I guess, for lack of a better word, while for all the talk about actual infrastructure, roads, bridges, things like that, this was sort of an arm of his plan that could be better described as human infrastructure, things to try to make the lives of his constituents better, in his words. And a big part of that was universal pre-K, his proposal, and child care for working families. Since then, with all the political machinations, now the Senate has sort of taken a lot of those principles and worked them into a $3.5 trillion, as of right now, package that they're hoping to pass through the budget reconciliation process, which is sort of an arcane kind of process that would allow them to pass it by a simple majority. And we can get into that a little bit more. While we're waiting for the president, though, let's talk a little bit more about the second leg of his trip, when he's headed up to Storrs later on today. We have Fox 61's Ben Goldman up there. He is going to be anchoring our coverage later on today on the Fox 61 News at 4 and 5 p.m., but he joins us now. Granted, still a long way away from him making his way to Storrs, but how are things looking there, Ben?
So, Tim, it's an exciting day here at UConn. It's not every day that a president comes to campus. A lot of the students are, walking around campus in amazement, waiting to see the president, lining up around campus to do so. I will tell you, if you travel basically anywhere between the city of Hartford and here in Storrs, Connecticut, Tim, the amount of road closures and blockages and police departments and security that is out here on campus and all the way back in Hartford is unbelievable for the president coming to town. It's an exciting day. The energy, it's exciting. It's not every day that you have news crews here on campus for students to see. We did see a couple protesters, but I will tell you, Tim, security is unbelievably tight here on the campus. As someone who went to school here, this is my old stomping grounds. I thought that maybe we'd be able to get a nice view of the Dodd Center, somewhere where it's, somewhere where students would know to go, but not everybody in the public would know to go. I will tell you, there is no getting close to the Dodd Center, which was named after, as you mentioned, Tim, Senator Thomas Dodd, and then will now be named in congruence with his son, Christopher Dodd. But Tim, I will also say, with all of that excitement and all of that energy, just a few minutes ago I heard a student ask one of the UConn police officers, what's going on today? Why are there cameras here? So there is energy, and then for other students, Tim, it's just another day here at UConn.
I was just curious. It's been a while since I've been up to campus, so sometimes my geography is a little off. Where around campus is the Dodd Center, Ben?
It is in the heart of the Storrs campus. If you're, many people have gone to Gamble Pavilion. Maybe you went over to the Co-op or the Student Union. That is really the center of the campus, the quad and the grassy areas right there. The Dodd Center is maybe less than 1/10 of a mile, which on this campus is not a lot because it's massive, in the eastward direction from that. So it is in the heartbeat of campus. It is not on one of the outskirts, which means and underscores.
Forgive me, Ben, we just need to interrupt you for a second because the president, as you can see right now, and Ben, we'll get back to you in a second, he is leaving Air Force One right now, and he is saluting a military representative, taking off his mask now that he is safely outside. And he will be making his way to Marine One shortly after just stopping to talk to, I can't make out who that is, you'll have to forgive me. I believe Fox 61's Julia LeBlanc was mentioning that somebody there, I believe a colonel, was waiting to see him. And he is making his way, we assume right now, to Marine One. Curious to see what it looks like when the president takes off. In the past, when a president, not just President Biden, but any president, has gotten onto Marine One, there has sometimes been more than one helicopter in the fleet that flies with him. So essentially, the president has other decoy planes to make it harder for people who want to know where he is to know exactly which aircraft he's in. Just one of the many security measures that are undertaken for him. And as you can see, he's on Marine One right now. There are different types of aircraft that would qualify as being Marine One. Like Air Force One, any aircraft that's carrying the president is called Marine One. I believe that is one that's made by Sikorsky, one of the larger, older models. And forgive me, I forget what it's called right off the bat, but I believe that is a Sikorsky aircraft made right here in Stratford. And he is already on board. He's just waiting for more people from his contingent to get on, and he is going to make his way to Brainerd Airport. Again, he was scheduled to land at Brainerd Airport sometime in the 12:40 to 12:45 range. It looks like everything is being bumped back by about 5 to 10 minutes because he was a little late to land. Yeah, I believe that is a Sikorsky VH-3D King, one of the larger, older, as opposed to a smaller White Hawk that is sometimes used as Marine One. But that, I believe, is the one that is more prominently, or at least more commonly used. And they are sealing things up so he can make his way, a very short jaunt when you're the only aircraft in the sky, to go from Windsor Locks right down to Hartford. So it will not take him long to get there. And again, just looking at the president's agenda, as of right now, he's scheduled to be delivering remarks at Capital Child Development Center there on Broad Street at 1:45. If we're adding the time delay into it, it looks like it might be a little bit closer to 2 o'clock. And remember, whenever it happens, we will be right there with it, and we will be having live coverage on the Fox 61 News at 4 and 5 p.m. You saw Ben Goldman. He was up there in Storrs, where the president is going to also be delivering remarks at the rededication of the Dodd Center there, to also be in dedication of Chris Dodd, not just his father, Thomas Dodd, for both of what they have done. And there we go. We see more than one helicopter right there. It looks like we've got two of the Sikorskys. As we were saying before, that is not uncommon. They often fly in a fleet. Reportedly, in some instances in the past, there's been as many as 5 that sort of scramble around and will even do what you could sort of describe as kind of like a sort of a shell game, sort of maneuvering themselves in the air to make it harder for somebody to pick out where the president is. And that's always just a matter of safety. Again, if you're wondering why is he flying down there, why doesn't he just hop in a car and drive? It might even go faster, especially when you don't have to worry about traffic with a police escort. Usually it is for safety reasons. And logistically, it's a lot simpler to just fly there instead of having to have a rolling sort of motorcade blocking off streets as you go. And even as it is, there's plenty of streets that are blocked off in Hartford. So that tends to happen more and more. But then also you have to consider the entire agenda. He's up in Windsor Locks right now. He's flying essentially due south 10 minutes to Hartford. But then if he were to drive there, he's got to find a way to get himself from Hartford all the way over to Storrs when he is scheduled to start delivering remarks at about 4 p.m. at the Dodd Center. Well, it just makes a lot more sense to fly from Brainerd Airport over to Storrs. Not sure exactly where he's landing in Storrs. We might be able to bring in Ben to talk more about that. But then after he's done with Storrs, also there's no direct route like there is on I-84 to get you from Hartford to Storrs, to get you from Storrs back to Bradley Airport, at least not an easily traveled one. So again, that's where Marine One comes in very handy. Essentially, he's just sort of making a triangular journey from Windsor Locks to Hartford, to Mansfield, and then right back to Windsor Locks. And he is scheduled to leave Windsor Locks at about 5:30 this afternoon and be safely back in the White House at 7 o'clock. Now, we have talked a lot about the itinerary of the trip. We've talked a lot about what he wants to sort of stress with regards to the human infrastructure, with regards to the universal pre-K he's proposing. Tony Terzi was talking about the child care for working families. Right now he is trying to propose, and by the way, this is also part of the Senate Democrats' overall $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation package. What he wants to do is get child care, affordable child care for working families, to try to make sure that low and middle-income families would never have to pay more than 7% of their income on child care for kids up to age 5. Reportedly, this plan covers all families that earn twice the state median income. I don't know if that means the individual income, which the state median is probably about $37,000 a year, or the family income, which would be more than twice that. If you're looking at the family income, it would be families making up to about $130,000 a year would be eligible, if that makes it through. These are a lot of big ifs, and we have not talked a lot about the opposition to this. Again, maybe we can bring in Ben to see what some of the protesters were about. But this is also coming at a time where the president's popularity is historically low, and part of the mess that was made sort of in Afghanistan with U.S. troop withdrawal. We have reported an awful lot that a Quinnipiac poll, which we like to focus on being a Connecticut entity. Oh, and by the way, look at that. We've got a couple of those twin props that are also following the president. We saw them back in May when the president came to the Coast Guard Academy. He initially landed in Air Force One at an Air Force base in Rhode Island, and then this sort of flying armada made its way to New London, and you're seeing that again now. Anyways, back to the president's approval rating. A recent poll from Quinnipiac put it at only 38%. To be fair, almost every other poll that has been taken in the near term has been better than that, but very, very few of them don't have him underwater. Usually about the average, according to 538.com, is right now about 43%. So he is trying to drum up some support, and hopefully that, for him, that would raise his approval rating, although that remains to be seen. This, in many ways, is still a very unpopular bill, even amongst moderate Democrats, just because of the outstanding price tag, many, many trillions of dollars. Okay, why don't we get over to Fox 61's Julia LeBlanc right now. She has spent the morning, as we said, right in and around Bradley Airport and Windsor Locks and in East Granby, waiting for the president to arrive. Julia, you said it was really something getting to see Air Force One there in person. What else can you tell us about the president's short time on the ground?
It really was. It was amazing to see Air Force One landing here at the Bradley Air Base. And what was even probably more amazing was the accompanying helicopters to Marine One just kind of taken off the ground with almost no effort there. There was really little taxiing for those helicopters and for Marine One. They just kind of traveled a little bit, 100 feet or so, and then just lifted off the tarmac into the air. And you can see them now. It looks like they might be extending that ladder on Air Force One once again. And the person who greeted the president earlier, Tim, I know you mentioned, you were wondering, it was Colonel Matthew Jones, who is the commander for the 89th Airlift Wing. So that was the only person who was here at Bradley greeting President Joe Biden. Again, no political leaders here greeting him. We know they have to meet him really quickly. They don't have Air Force One to bring them to Hartford, so they were not greeting the president here, but they will see him as soon as he gets to Hartford and he stays at that child care center and promotes his Build Back Better plan. Of course, a lot more to happen after that, and we will send it back to the studio for you to tell us a little bit more about the rest of the visit. For now, we are at Bradley.
And Air Force One will be waiting there for the president until later this afternoon. Okay, on to Tony Terzi, who is at the next stop, if you don't count Brainerd Airport, where the president is first scheduled to speak. Tony, on Broad Street in Hartford, good morning.
Hey, good afternoon there, Tim. Good afternoon, everyone. Capitol Child Development Center behind me here is where the president is scheduled to speak about his Build Back Better plan, which, of course, as we've talked about $450 billion is carved out for child care and preschools in this plan. One of the problems in the child care system, the typical Connecticut child care worker earns under $13 an hour. And according to the White House, these low wages contribute to between 26% and 40% of annual turnover in the workplace. So the president will be here to speak about how exactly this will be parsed out, his Build Back Better plan. For now, we're going to send it back inside from the corner of Broad and Capitol to Tim Lammers. Tim.
We'll have more from him. Okay, over to Ben Goldman, who is at the president's second stop at Storrs at the Dodd Center, where there's going to be a dedication ceremony at about 4 o'clock. Ben, sorry we had to cut you off earlier, but the president was just getting out of Air Force One. If you could, again, you had mentioned there were a couple protesters there already. Are you close enough to them to see what specifically they were protesting about?
No, we are on the opposite side of where those protesters are, Tim. This is where the media is set up outside of the perimeter surrounding the Dodd Center. But as I was saying last time we were speaking, where this Dodd Center is located is truly in the heart of campus, which underscores UConn's belief in the importance of this center. A couple of moments ago, we were speaking with one of the heads of the political science department here at UConn, talking about this event, talking about the president's approval rating, talking about what we can expect the president to be speaking about inside the Dodd Center. It's a very small 300-person group that'll be watching the president. Some of those individuals are students here, political science students and government affairs students at UConn. It'll be a great opportunity for them to see the president. And Tim, as you mentioned, that all kicks off. He'll be arriving here sometime around 3 o'clock and probably speaking around 4 p.m. We'll bring that to you live on the Fox 61 News at 4 and 5 o'clock. Tim, back to you.
Okay, Ben, thank you so much. Yes, and we will have live coverage for you from out in Storrs at the Fox 61 News at 4 and 5 p.m. today, and then a full wrap-up of the president's trip on the Fox 61 News at 10 and 11. Of course, remember, it's not just on air. You can always get it on the Fox 61 app, as well as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. All of our social media channels, we will have the president's full visit covered for you. I'm Tim Lammers. Thank you so much for joining us here this afternoon. We're going to return you now to your regularly scheduled programming. Have a good afternoon, everybody.